Some people like buying games digitally because of their convenience. Some people prefer physical because you can resell the game. Most people have a preference, and that's not going to change. But what about the games companies? What do they prefer? And what can we learn as consumers about their preferences? To answer these questions, we're going to look at the following areas. First, the financial aspects of digital and physical games. Next, companies' preferences and how they try and influence us as consumers. Then finally, how physical and digital mediums coexist. Let's start by looking at who's making money when you buy a game and how much money they're making. First, a quick disclaimer, the numbers we're going to use here can't be exact due to many factors that impact each purchase, like taxes, returns, and different contracts in place between companies. Also, we're going to ignore any upfront costs associated with physical games releases, like for example, testing the prototype disc version before the approval for mass production. With that out of the way, let's start with digital. Let's say you buy a full price, brand new game digitally from an eShop, like Steam, the PlayStation Store, or the Nintendo eShop. The company who owns the digital store is going to take a cut of the revenue from selling the game. This covers their costs for hosting the store, processing payments, providing support, marketing, and other associated costs, plus a healthy profit margin for the company. Normally, this is going to be around 30%. The rate can be lower for certain stores, like the Microsoft Store for PC games, who announced last year that their cut would go from 30 to 12%. This may also be lower for large publishers, who may have deals with eShops because of their size and influence, but the norm for most major eShops is still around 30%. After the eShop takes their cut, the remaining amount, usually around 70%, is sent to the publisher and developer. Here I've grouped them together because the split between the publisher and developer can vary based on the contracts in place, and we won't have time here to do that topic justice. Not to mention that a lot of the times there is no split between publisher and developer because the publisher owns the developer. Think Activision, who publishes games for Infinity Ward and Treyarch, but also owns both. There are also many developers who publish their own games, so that's why we aren't splitting it out here. Next, let's take a look at physical games. Same situation as before, you're buying a brand new, full price game, but this time you go to your local game store. First, the store is going to take their cut of the revenue. Again, this amount is going to be different depending on the contracts in place, but for this example, it's safe to say that it's around 30%. This covers the cost for the store to operate, like the rent, utilities, employee salaries, and of course, some profit for the company. Before the sale, there is also the cost for the discs and the case to be made. The manufacturer will likely charge a flat fee for each copy of the game they produced. Here, let's say it's a charge of roughly $3 to $5 per game. On a full price game, that's around 5% of the retail price. Next, there'll be a licensing fee charged by the console manufacturers, Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo, for the right to have your game on their system. These companies end up being the same companies that own the eShops from the example before. For this, we'll say around 15%. Then, finally, the remainder is sent to the publisher. Here, they end up with around 50% of the selling price, or $35 of a $70 game. Again, I want to reiterate that the numbers used in this example aren't exact, as it's going to be different on a case-by-case basis, depending on the size of the publisher, the contracts in place, the volume they're expected to sell, and many other factors. Not to mention that these numbers aren't often published and can be pretty hard to get a hold of. Now that we have an idea of the breakdown on where your money ends up, let's take a look at the implications for games companies and how that impacts us as consumers. Let's talk about the obvious first. The physical game pie has doubled the amount of people taking slices out of it. Because of the manufacturer and retail store taking around 30% of revenue, the console manufacturers, who mostly end up being the same people who own the online shops, are losing around $10, and publishers are losing around $15 on the sale of each physical copy. This makes it really clear that publishers and console manufacturers are going to prefer digital sales because there's more money in it for them. This has started pushing these games companies to promote digital sales. For instance, console manufacturers are now making digital-only versions of consoles at a reduced price. And sure, there's likely other reasons for digital-only consoles, but if physical games were making these companies more money than digital versions, I don't think we would be seeing many digital-only consoles. Another example from the publisher side is for the upcoming release of the new Call of Duty game. If you pre-order the game digitally, you're able to play the campaign a week before the game comes out. If you pre-order a physical copy, you don't get that bonus. Pre-orders in general are a whole other topic I want to talk about in a dedicated video, but here it's clear that Activision is pushing for digital sales. The increased revenue for publishers from digital sales is one of the reasons why, nowadays, you mostly only see higher profile games in stores, because lower profile and indie games can't afford to lose the money that they would have to share with retailers and manufacturers. Especially manufacturers, because they end up eating a larger percentage of the revenue, because these games often have a lower selling price and manufacturers charge a flat fee per game, not a percentage of the selling price. Not to mention that the pre-production costs involved, such as testing the disc, can really add up for these smaller low-budget companies. We also have to consider the manufacturer and retail store's point of view. Manufacturing, although important, are a smaller piece of the pie here, and so we're going to ignore them for now. Not to mention that a lot of manufacturing companies can pivot to manufacture other products more easily. Lots of retail stores that sell games end up selling many other things, and so they wouldn't actually suffer very much from the loss of game sales. Think your Best Buy, your Walmarts, and your Amazon. But there are also many retailers that cater specifically to video games, like GameStop and your local game store, that depend on physical game sales to stay open. The shift in games companies' focus on digital has pushed these stores to start selling other items. This is why you're seeing a wider variety of products, like plushies, action figures, and books in stores like GameStop nowadays. This now leaves the decision up to us as consumers. Ignoring the other factors involved, like the convenience of digital or the collectability of physical, we as consumers get to decide who we would rather be supporting with our game purchase. Digital puts more money into the pockets of console manufacturers and publishers, while physical keeps help retail stores around. You may be asking yourself, if the console manufacturers and publishers get more money from selling digital versions of games, why are physical copies still being made and sold? And while you're right that they do prefer digital, as noted before, they're pushing for digital with new consoles and digital-only benefits. Also, in recent years, physical games have been on the decline. However, games companies, especially the big ones, are looking to make as much money as possible and know that even though the game you play will be the same in the end, digital copies and physical copies are two different products that cater to two different groups of people. And although, if a game was digital only, many people who prefer physical games would buy it digitally instead, there are some who wouldn't buy it at all. These companies still make physical versions because they're thinking about the extra money that they're going to get from collectors who are going to spend extra money on special editions, parents who are buying games to put under the Christmas tree, or people who have bad internet connections, and people who may impulse buy a game while browsing around a store. There are also other benefits for these companies, like the posters they can put up in stores and the marketing that comes with it. This also helps explain why digital and physical copies of games cost the same amount of money. Because if a game company knows that they can get $70 for a game when we're buying them digitally without discounts, then they have no reason to drop the price. Finally, I hope this video helped you get a better understanding of games companies and has made you more informed as a consumer about the gaming industry. Leave a like and let me know if you have any suggestions for further videos in the comments section. Thanks.